Past epidemics in Nepal's history. Since the beginning of the agriculture age, two changes in human lifestyle have led to epidemics. The first change that came with the agriculture economy was the development of permanent and dense settlement. In order for epidemics to spread, the population density must be high. The second change brought by the agriculture economy was the beginning of the practice of domesticating animals. As animals became pets, contact between humans and animals increased. It transmitted animal disease to humans. Therefore, it took the form of epidemics in various ways. Infectious disease such as smallpox, tuberculosis, chickenpox, plague, measles, cholera, flu, and HIV/AIDS have been transmitted from animals to humans. The coronavirus, which recently spread from Wuhan, China, is also said to have transmitted from the bats to humans. In the past, infected people were kept out of settlements to protect others from epidemics. Outsiders were not allowed to enter the village or city. Such a practice was typical of what is now called quarantine or isolation. The plague that swept across Europe between 1346 and 1352 AD killed about a quarter of the population. In some cities, up to 70% of the population was dead. By the end of World War I, influenza had killed nearly 20 million people. Throughout history, we have witnessed the tragedy of epidemics, the effects of which are recorded everywhere in historical documents and in our psychology. Various genealogies, description of Nepal written by foreigner, correspondence in history, folk song, etc. have ample mention about the epidemics that Nepal has faced at different times. Considering these references, the epidemic of cholera and smallpox is most prevalent in Nepal. It is mentioned that when the epidemic spread during the reign of Lichvi king Puspadev, taro with milk was placed on the door in summer. From this, it can be seen that in Nepali society, the use of taro has been used in food as well as religiously and culturally. In the Gopal Raj Vangshavali prepared during the reign of Jaisthiti Malla, it is mentioned that an epidemic spread in Kathmandu during the reign of Lichvi kings Amritdev, Arimalladev, Avemalladev, Jayadev, etc. A glimpse of past epidemic and catastrophes from the Gopal dynasty. 1. Epidemic famine in the time of King Sri Arimalladev. 2. Fire and epidemic in the time of King Jayadev. 3. The epidemic of King Puspadev's time. 4. In the year 235 Nepal Sambat, there was an epidemic smallpox in the time of King Vasantadev. 5. Half of the people died in the famine of 239 Nepal Sambat. 6. Excessive rainfall of 240 Nepal Sambat. 7. Heavy snowfall of 350 Nepal Sambat killed half of the animals. 8. In 352 Nepal Sambat, famine and starvation destroyed a large number of people. 9. Heavy snowfall in 362 Nepal Sambat. 10. Heavy rainfall in 364 Nepal Sambat. 11. The epidemic of 375 Nepal Sambat destroyed great lives and property. 12. Epidemic created by Tamauri incident in 436 Nepal Sambat. 13. Epidemic of Nepal Sambat 448. 14. Outbreaks of smallpox during 449 Nepal Sambat. 15. Epidemic of 458 Nepal Sambat. 16. Heavy rains of 461 Nepal Sambat. 17. Heavy snowfall of 483 Nepal Sambat. 18. Drought of 501 Nepal Sambat. Avemalla is one such unfortunate ruler in the history of Nepal, during whose time many epidemics spread. According to Gopal dynasty, it is mentioned that the life of people became difficult when the price of groundnut skyrocketed during the epidemic spreading in Nepal Sambat 352. At that time, 1/3 of the people had lost their lives due to the epidemic and famine. During the reign of Avemalla from Nepal Sambat 362 Ma Krishna Pachami, there was heavy snowfall for a week and great wealth was lost. Less than 2 years have passed. It is mentioned that another epidemic has come to prevent people from coming out of the house for 4 days from Nepal Sambat 364 Asar Krishna Ausi. During the reign of this king, a great earthquake on the day of Nepal Sambat 375 Asar Shukla Tritiya had caused great damage to 1/3 of the people. In the letter 46a of Gopal Rajbhandari, it is mentioned that 1/3 of the people died due to the great epidemic year after the incident of tears of blood coming from the eyes of the deity Bhairav of Bhaktapur Tamaudi on Saturday 12 Asar Suddhi of Nepal Sambat 436. In another incident mentioned in letter 46a of the same genealogy, the word Machalvya is clearly mentioned. Nepal Sambat 453, on the day of Bhadra Krishna Astami in Tripur, Bhaktapur, Manigal, Patan, Fapi, Farping, 22 children are said to have fallen ill due to Mahachalavya, and other animals like calves, cattle, deer, chickens, dogs, sparrow, and even birds have died. In the additional letter of the same genealogy, 466 Nepal Sambat, it is mentioned that a great epidemic broke out in Banepa on the 5th of January 466 Nepal Sambat, 2 days after the enemy conquered Bhaktapur Kasankuan. It is mentioned that after the epidemic spread to Pannauti, Sangal, and other places, the settlement itself became foul-smelling, especially when livestock died and were thrown on the road without a place to bury their bodies. According to the genealogy, a great epidemic of smallpox spread in Kathmandu around 1171 BS, killing innumerable people, and the epidemic was stopped only after the establishment of a deity. In the same genealogy, in 449 Nepal Sambat or in 1386 Bikram Sambat, it is mentioned that another great epidemic spread from Phagun Shukla to Bhadra, killing about 100 people a day. The name of that epidemic is Kanimrak. It is unknown at this time what Kanimrak disease really was. But it is clear that this disease was named by the people of Kantipur. Kani means corn and Matak means rupture. That is to say, it is known that the disease which erupts like corn is literally smallpox. From this, it is confirmed that this epidemic of 449 Nepal Sambat is most affected towards Kantipur. According to an incident of Nepal Sambat 799, an influential member of the royal family of Kantipur, Ranjit Malla's daughter, died of smallpox. This epidemic started from Nepal Sambat 799 Shravan and spread so much in Kantipur that it is mentioned that on 799 Bhadra Shukla Chaturthi Saturday, people prayed for forgiveness in 5 different places of Kantipur. An epidemic has spread in Kantipur since Nepal Sambat 836 Chaitra, in which 100 to 120 people die every day. Later, in Patan 2, people died from house to house since Asar. This sequence continued till Ashwin Kartik. At that time, 108 to 110 people died in a day. At the beginning of this epidemic, many animals like rats, chicken, goats, calves, cow, horses, elephants died in the house. Then it is mentioned that the people died after that. The fact that the epidemic of smallpox was spreading in Kathmandu is also evident from the fact that the Newars here worship Sitala Devi. Smallpox is also called Sitala. The adoration of Sitala Devi, the goddess who cures smallpox, makes it clear that smallpox has caused great terror to the people here. Among the Newars, there are plenty of folk songs of devotion to Sitala Devi. In Malla's period, many people died to such unknown epidemics. At that time, such epidemics were called Bombe. Machalave here means a disease that affects children, while Von Lavya means a disease that affects the family. Outbreaks such as cholera, diarrhea, smallpox, tuberculosis, measles, mumps, fever, colds, and dysentery often kill many people. The incidence of such epidemics in Malla's period can be known from the notes of that time. It is learned that Kantipur was more affected than Bhaktapur and Patan. At the end of 1779 BS, The 11 missionaries arrived in Kantipur on their way from India to Tibet were led by Pastor Joy Emmanuel Flair Letty. When they reached Kantipur, there was an epidemic of plague. The plague, first seen in rats, later appeared in humans. Of these, 18,714 people died in Kantipur alone. Compared to Kantipur, Bhaktapur and Patan were less affected. Due to the plague epidemic in 1779 Bikram Sambat, King Vaskar Malla of Kantipur also died. At that time, the month of Chaitya Dasai was celebrated. Bhaktapur and Patan did not celebrate Chaitya Dasai as it was Malmas, but Kantipur celebrated Chaitya Dasai. Because Kantipur celebrated Dasai during Malmas, where no festivals should be celebrated, this led to an outbreak of an epidemic in Kantipur. Up to 150 people and animals died daily in Kantipur. Chautara Bhagal Thakur of Kantipur kept King Vaskar Malla safely in a house in Swayambhu. According to the advice of Yogi, King Vaskar Malla found out that the epidemic had subsided after feeding the poor gurus with donation. It is mentioned that King Vaskar Malla died of the same disease when he came to Hanuman Darbar by jumping from the window of that house of Swayambhu. The Capuchin Christian missionaries who stayed in the Kathmandu Valley in 1740 AD have also written about the spread of smallpox in Kathmandu during the Malla's period. At that time, 11 missionaries had arrived in Kathmandu from India on their way to Tibet. While they were in Kathmandu, the epidemic spread. The Kantipur kingdom closed the gates of Kathmandu to prevent the epidemic from spreading out of control. The missionaries had to stay in Kathmandu from February 6 to October 4, 1740 AD, as the gates were closed. There are evidence that such epidemic have reoccurred even after the Malla's period. After the conquest of Bhaktapur by Prithvinarayan Saha, the death of Prithvinarayan Saha himself, the death of Pratap Singh Saha, the death of Rani Kantivati, wife of Rana Bahadur Saha, the death of Girvan Yuddha Bikram Saha, etc. seems to have been caused by various diseases. History will never forget the atrocities committed by Rana Bahadur Saha during his wife Kantavati's disease or his son Girvan Yuddha Bikram Saha's illness in 1869 BS. The incident of sending all the children and their families out of Kathmandu Valley in 1861 Bikram Sambat by King Rana Bahadur Saha is very heartbreaking. The statue of Harati Azima was completely destroyed once during the regime of King Rana Bahadur Saha. It is said that an epidemic disease, smallpox, spread throughout the valley and it killed a lot of children. Then King Rana Bahadur Saha had 4 queens and the youngest of all was his beloved one. He had one son from the young queen named Girvan Yuddha Bikram Saha. The king Rana Bahadur Saha ordered a lot of people to leave the place with the fear that smallpox might transfer to his queen and son. Finally, when his queen also suffered from smallpox and queen died, King Rana Bahadur Saha went to Swayambhu and ordered to lift the statue of Harati Azima, and he destroyed the statue and ordered to throw away. Legend says that when King Rana Bahadur Saha was destroying the statue cried out loud, and it is also said that the statue was thrown near to Vishnumati river. King Rana Bahadur Saha furthermore destroyed a lot of statues, and he went to destroy the doors of Santipur shrine. He lost his vision of one eye and fainted there. Later, King Rana Bahadur Saha apologized and established new statue of Harati Azima in the temple, and he started a new tradition of offering gold coin once a year in Santipur and perform Kshama Puja every year as an apology for what he did. The king Rana Bahadur Saha's erratic behavior brought about his own downfall, forcing him to flee to exile in British-held Varanasi. Although Rana Bahadur Saha managed to return to Kathmandu in 1863 BS, he was beheaded by his own half-brother Sher Bahadur Saha. Girvan Yuddha Bikram Saha, the son of Rana Bahadur Saha, finally died of the same disease smallpox in 1873 BS. 10 people, including the son of chief, died in an epidemic in Kathmandu on the day of Nepal Sambat 951 Jeshtabadi. 2 went sati. In order to prevent this disease from entering the Hanuman Dhoka palace, the people inside the Hanuman Dhoka palace were not allowed to go outside, and those who came from outside were not allowed to enter the palace. It is learned that King Rajendra Bikram Saha and Kazi Vincent Thapa also did not go out. Even after that, when the epidemic spread, the gates of Kathmandu were closed. Take, for example, the decree issued in the name of Subedar Anantya Khawas and Subedar Niranjan, stationed at Chisapani in Chait, 1862 Bikram Sambat. In the English translation of the royal decree, it is mentioned that there was a panic among the workers working against the disease diarrhea in Chisapani. Both the Subedars have been ordered to close the Chisapani border crossing to prevent the smallpox from spreading to Kathmandu. It has been ordered to allow traders and orders to reach Bargaon from Farping through Nakku River if they have to reach Kathmandu, but not to go to Farping from Chitlan. The royal decree states, "We have sent instruction to Chautaria Bam Saha as to what to do if someone is found to have smallpox and where to keep such people. You should do the same. If an epidemic spread from there, you will be responsible for it. Be careful." At that time, the cholera epidemic was affecting people all over the country, including Kathmandu. Outbreaks of cholera are also widely reported in history. A representative letter to Charles Thorsby, the resident representative of East India Company in Nepal, dated 23rd September 1847, to the upper body in Kolkata, can be taken as an example. The letter contains interesting details about the cholera epidemic in Kathmandu and the steps taken by the royal palace to stay safe from it. At the time, a letter written by the head of one country to another head country was called Kharita. After Surendra Bikram became king in Nepal, the Governor-General of the Calcutta-based company government sent a letter in the name of both Surendra Bikram Saha and his father Rajendra Bikram Saha to the resident representative Thorsby. Due to the spread of cholera in Kathmandu, Thorsby could not deliver the letter. In a letter to Calcutta, Thorsby said, "Cholera has been rampant in Kathmandu since mid-August and the situation is still very much the same. For some time, the consequences have been frightening. As a result, the palace is closed. The Maharaja used to meet only his closest person living inside the palace. They are not allowed to go out of the palace premises. Some high-ranking government officials are allowed to visit the king, but they must take a bath and change their clothes before meeting him. Therefore, it is necessary to postpone the program of offering Kavita to the Maharaja for a few more days." Apart from smallpox and cholera, epidemic of other diseases also used to spread in Kathmandu. According to Capuchin missionaries in Kathmandu, about 20,000 people fell victim to the plague that broke out in Kathmandu in 1716. The fact that scabies used to harass Nepalese is also evident from the fact that Saune Sankranti is celebrated as the day of throwing scabies. However, it is clear from the historical context that smallpox and cholera used to make Nepalese the most tragic in history. In the history of Nepal, there have been two main measures in the history to prevent the epidemic. First, to please God. Second, to take necessary action. At that time, epidemic was considered a divine calamity. In case of smallpox, it became customary to worship Sitala Maju. Worshipping Cheravati in the case of cholera diarrhea, worshipping Vijayeshwari in the case of child suffering from disease, offering water in Shiva Ling of Joreswar Mahadev in the case of fever seems to have been tried by the people of Kathmandu Valley during epidemic. When the plague broke out in Kathmandu around 1716 AD, Christians were blamed for it. After the infidel Christians preached the religion in Kathmandu by wearing black clothes, which were considered untouchables, there were rumors that the gods were angry and an epidemic had spread. The missionaries were forced to change the color of their clothes when they found out that the people of Kathmandu believed that the epidemic could be stopped only by making the angry gods happy. Attempts were made to stop the epidemic by worshipping, chanting, meditating, fasting, making vows, etc. in the name of the deity. In doing so, other measures were taken in a parallel to protect against the epidemic. Infected people were kept away from the settlement. Outsiders were not allowed to enter the village or city. It is still common in the elderly society to believe that If a person with cholera is cut off from the river, or if an infected people is kept away from the settlement, the epidemic will not spread. Such a practice was typical of what is now called quarantine or isolation. We must realize that epidemics are coming and going from time to time. It should be understood that even if the epidemic causes human damage, it will not able to attack the overall existence of human race. Thank you.